Hello everybody, my name is Brooklyn, otherwise known as the Dramatic Otaku, and welcome to the second episode of Read and Review, the series that I definitely didn't fucking forget about. Haha. Today we'll be talking about the short story collection by Rumiko Takahashi, the creator of Inuyasha, Urusei Yatsura, and Ranma One Half, this being Came the Mirror and Other Stories, with numerous supernatural and horror stories, and while they are comedic, as is the Takahashi way, they do have some elements of gore and uncomfortable themes, but it is minimal and is much more supernatural and slice of lifey too. We have about 6 stories: Came the Mirror, Revenge Doll, The Star with a Thousand Faces, Little Flower, With Cat, and My Sweet Sunday, in that order. Now, I found this short story collection on the Viz Media app, not sponsored, wish they fucking would, and read it across a couple of hours. Now, My Sweet Sunday, the last story of the collection, is an autobiographical one-shot by Rumiko Takahashi with Mitsuru Adachi, and I'm not a big fan of these autobiographies in short story collections. I know in my wee wrap-up I talked about liking autobiographical stories from authors, not necessarily when it's in a short story collection, so I'm gonna leave this particular story unrated, but I did find it interesting finding out about the history of these two and really putting into context how important some of the older mangakas, such as Kazuo Umezu, was to some of my favourite mangakas. But now onto the actual stories, starting with Came the Mirror, the namesake of the collection. Each person at some point in their life wakes up one day with a mirror on their hand. This is a spirit mirror, and the role of the mirror is to take evil spirits out of people and suck them into the mirror. One does this by using the mirror as a vacuum to take the spirit away from the person, stomp the spirit on the ground, and suck it up into the mirror, which sucks it through your body. Apparently not the most great experience. Once the quota is filled, the mirror disappears and you can move on with your life. However, doing this apparently can get yourself killed, as our protagonists find out when they are murdered by a corrupted man. Being resurrected a week before their deaths, these two have to find a way to exorcise this man before he goes on to murder them. For a time loop to prevent death concept, this one is pretty standard, but this one, out of all the stories in the rest of the collection, is one of the tensest ones and has the most monster gore as compared to the rest of the stories. Pretty much, if you want to think Inuyasha levels of gore in terms of like the monsters and defeating them. The villain was also pretty standard and creepy, not necessarily because he looked creepy, but because he was a creep. I gave this story personally a 6.5 out of 10. It did set up the collection really well, but with how the rest of these stories played out, it was pretty standard. Next is Revenge Doll. Revenge Doll is a little bit underwhelming in comparison, especially as a horror or spooky story. It's more of a slice of life with supernatural themes. The story involves a doll similar to that of a Daruma doll. Sorry for the mispronunciation. But instead of making a wish and filling in the eye when it comes true, this doll, you fill in its eyes and say the name of someone you wish to harm. The first eye causes inconvenience, the second eye, physical harm, and the third one, death. Our protagonist is a mangaka with a failing series, and he is bitter. He received the Revenge Doll as a reference to one of his previous series of the same name, and as a fan item. He's cursed his girlfriend, his editor, and wonders who he should kill, when one of the editors he hired is suddenly replacing his series in the magazine that he's been working with. Suddenly, he wonders if he should kill this underling when his girlfriend finds the doll. Shenanigans ensue, and in the end, the final eye is not filled in. After Came the Mirror, I was really expecting more from this collection, so this story came off as underwhelming. But it is very on par with Takahashi's style of punishing selfish protagonists if they are doing something stupid and selfish, a la Urusei Yatsura. It is also, weirdly, usually a woman who is the man's undoing too. just a little thread that I've found in lots of Takahashi's works, but I gave this one a 6 out of 10. The next story is The Star with a Thousand Faces, and this is a little bit confusing and kind of has a weird ending. In the most basic way, The Star with a Thousand Faces is the title of a TV show our protagonist is the star of, and the last episode is fast approaching airing, but has not yet been filmed. And the protagonist is missing. Her manager and the production is trying to find her, while she, on the other hand, is going to attempt suicide because she thinks she has murdered someone. That someone being a producer on the show after he got drunk and fell down the stairs. Well, she didn't murder him, in fact, and we have my favorite fiction trope of miscommunication. Yay! The story ends with her being found because she's hiding out in a fan's family's inn, and the show is filmed at the inn without her realizing. But then she jumps into action. See how that explanation was a little bit confusing at the end? That is how I felt reading this story. And as compared to Revenge Doll or Came the Mirror, this was incredibly underwhelming in comparison to those two, and I felt just progressively underwhelmed as I continued reading. That's why it took me a few hours to read this entire book. While I was underwhelmed with Revenge Doll, I was straight up disappointed with this one, so I gave it a 3 out of 10. Now that being said, we can look up with Little Flower. This is a stalker horror and is very tense, as someone is leaving this smelly flower in front of our protagonist, one that she hates, but everyone around her loves. She's also getting numerous emails from this random creep, and it turns out these two events are connected. And the stalker is trying to get the protagonist to fall in love with him with the smelly flower. Only it doesn't work because she's the only person on the planet who hates the smell of the flower. The end is a little sudden and again underwhelming, but this one is definitely one of my favorites due to the mystery and the tenseness. I gave this one an 8 out of 10. I don't want to spoil it too much because this is generally one of the better stories in the book, especially if you like tense mysteries. Now is With the Cat, the last of the actual fiction stories in this collection. With Cat, I loved, but completely did not expect. This one is a slice of life romance with supernatural elements. We have two protagonists, a guy and a girl, and the girl has a cat, and as children, the guy got so scared of the cat that he fell out of a tree and broke his arm. In their teen years, they rarely talk despite having feelings for one another and having grown up together. They couldn't be further apart. The tree incident really affected their friendship. The cat, from before, goes at some point to attack the guy, re-breaking his arm and somehow dies in the process, cursing the guy to be possessed by this dead cat. His arm transforming into the cat's arm and is now out of his control. The guy and the girl need to figure out what the cat's last wish was to let the cat rest in peace, the two falling back in love in the process. It is honestly very, very cute, if not a little bit pervy at some times, and despite the supernatural themes, is very romance oriented. I wasn't expecting it personally, and I honestly loved it for that reason. It did feel a little bit odd being a part of this specific collection, but I guess because it is a Rumiko Takahashi, that's sort of the connecting thread of this entire collection. But still, personally, the actual story got a 9 out of 10 because I really, really enjoyed it. It is one of my favorite stories from this collection, but with the context of the whole collection being slightly more supernatural or horror themed, I gave it a 7 in context of the collection, but this is generally one of my favorite one-shots. I would recommend reading it separately to the collection. Same with Little Flower. Now, overall, due to my dislike of The Star with a Thousand Faces and my uninterest in the biography at the end, I gave the entire collection a 6 out of 10, which I do feel is fair, as what I was expecting going into this was a horror anthology, and this is more of a supernatural anthology. Obviously, This is from a perspective of just randomly stumbling across this story and not really researching it whatsoever, which can be unfair to the collection as a whole. But that's why I make these specific videos. So you guys can know what parts of the anthology I find really good as compared to the stories I like less, which doctor points from my final score. It may seem stupid, but this is my stupid series that I definitely didn't forget about. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like this video or do have more recommendations for manga, please leave them in the comments down below. I always love hearing about recommendations to give to me. As you can see, I have a fucking huge library of books at the moment, so I always appreciate recommendations. If you've read this short story book, what do you think of it? Are you a Rumiko Takahashi fan? Will you go read this book? Will you wear wigs? Let me know all down in the comments down below, and I hope to see you guys next week. Bye.